X-Men Dark Phoenix has arrived with a bunch of Easter eggs, an alternate ending, and a hefty amount of what just happened.
We did no preparation for this movie whatsoever.
What's up, Comic Book Nation? Beatty here with your recap to the rescue, breaking down everything you might have missed in X-Men Dark Phoenix, which might be everything if you listened to the rough reviews. The movie starts out with a brutal car crash claiming the life of Jean's mother, and it was accidentally Jean's fault.
My vision for this film was to do the rawest, most intense X-Men movie we've ever done. And so I just wanted the audience to know from the very beginning, this is not, you know, your sort of maybe kind of broader, campier X-Men movie.
Then it's 1992, the same year as the X-Men animated series launch, and the X-Men are headed to space. Their flight out of the X-Mansion comes with a huge parallel to the original X-Men film, which saw the basketball court opening up and a ball rolling across it. Trying to save some astronauts, Jean ends up taking on the Phoenix Force and bringing it back to Earth. Things don't go well for Jean because she meets her dad and he blames her for what happened to her mom, which is the opposite of John Gray from the comics, who thoroughly loved Jean. Outside of this house, there was a truck labeled Bishop Power, a reference to the X-Men character of Bishop, who can manipulate electricity. Jean gets pretty pissed at her dad for the crappy things he says just before the X-Men show up, so partially because the story called for it and partially because Jennifer Lawrence didn't seem to want anything to do with this movie, Jean accidentally uses all of that Phoenix Force power and kills Mystique.
It was definitely like a highly, highly emotional scene for the both of us, personally, I think.
So Jean pieces out and heads to Genosha, where Magneto is holed up. This is the same place where Magneto was hanging out in X3 The Last Stand, and its history in Marvel Comics comes with details of it once being a place where mutants were enslaved. Now Eric is using it as a mutant-only haven, also known to Marvel Comics fans as a brotherhood, but the army shows up and Jean strongly outmatches Magneto in a fight over a helicopter.
I wanted to show that Sophie had a lot more power there, so she's very gracefully doing these movements, and I'm like, gonna bust a vein, you know? And I wanted to show that surprise with him and the real struggle, because we know that at this point he's a very powerful entity into himself. So if she's doing it with such ease and he's struggling so much, you know you're dealing with something phenomenal.
Meanwhile, Jessica Chastain, who is playing a character that is definitely not a shape-shifting Skrull, because we saw shape-shifting Skrulls in Captain Marvel, so even though she can shape-shift, she is definitely not a shape-shifting Skrull. Oh wait, did they reshoot a huge portion of this movie because it had similarities to Captain Marvel? Yes, but still, she is definitely not a Skrull in this cut. She probably was a Skrull before reshoots, but in the theatrical release, Jessica Chastain is playing Vuk, an alien shapeshifter from the Dabari Empire, which is not an attribute those characters have in Marvel Comics. They do have a small history on those pages, though. Magneto decides he has to kill Jean. Charles thinks that's not okay. They fight on the streets of London. Well, that's New York, but it was definitely really shot in London, right down to a red double-decker bus making an appearance. The mutants are captured after their feud, but not before Scott Summers got to say the F word and unleash his laser eyes.
On this one, we did a Wi-Fi mechanism where I control the interactive lights by just pushing the buttons. So.
Long story short, there's a showdown on a train, which includes some cool stuff with Magneto shooting a bunch of guns at Vuk and Nightcrawler putting his tail through a guy's neck, but Jean has to carry Vuk up to the cosmos and sacrifice herself to defeat this alien villain once and for all, reminiscent of the Dark Phoenix Saga comics. Charles and Eric wrap up the entire X-Men franchise by playing a game of chess, calling back to, well, every other time they played a game of chess, and when Magneto said, "I made the first move," referencing chess back in the first X-Men movie. Xavier's school is renamed Jean Grey's School for Gifted Youngsters, which is a call to Wolverine naming the school after Jean Grey, calling it the School for Higher Learning in the comics. Ultimately, Jean Grey narrates and says something like, "This is not the end for me or the X-Men, this is a new beginning," which seems pretty fitting considering this really is the end of the line for a near 20-year franchise, which is gearing up for a reboot under Disney's control so the X-Men can join the Marvel Cinematic Universe. What Easter eggs and references did you catch in X-Men Dark Phoenix? What do you want to see from the franchise as it heads into the MCU? Share your thoughts in the comment section or send them my way on Instagram and Twitter @BrandonDavisBD, and stay tuned to comicbook.com/Marvel for more.